Marcus had a great life, a career he was proud of, a beautiful home he had designed himself, and a wife named Diana, charming, mysterious, always the most interesting person in any room. 8 years of marriage, 8 years of what looked, from the outside, like a perfect life. And then one Tuesday afternoon, he came home early from work. The house was empty. Diana had said she had a meeting, but her car was in the driveway, and her phone, the phone she never let him touch, was face down on the kitchen counter. Marcus stood there in the silence of his own house and felt something he had never felt before. He felt like a stranger. This is the story of what he found out, and I promise you, you will not see it coming. Let me tell you about Marcus and Diana. Marcus was an architect. He designed buildings for a living, spaces where people would live and work and raise families. He was good at it, patient, precise, creative. Diana was something else entirely. She had appeared in his life 8 years ago at a gallery opening, elegant, confident, with a laugh that made everyone nearby turn to look. He fell for her immediately. Most people did. They married within a year, built a life together in the house Marcus designed with his own hands. Diana didn't work. She had a small inheritance that covered her expenses, or so she said. She spent her days painting, reading, keeping the house beautiful. From the outside, they were the couple everyone wanted to be. But Marcus would later realize that he had been so busy building things for other people. He had never looked closely enough at the life he was living inside his own walls. It started with small things, the way it always does. Diana started going out more. Meetings, she said, with her art dealer, with a gallery in the city, lunches that ran long, evenings where she came home distracted and distant. The phone was always with her, always face down on surfaces, always on silent. One night, Marcus reached over in bed to check the time and accidentally brushed against her phone. She was awake instantly. Took the phone before he could see the screen. Said she was just checking something. He didn't say anything, but he started paying attention. He noticed she had created a new email account he had never seen. He noticed cash withdrawals from their joint account. Small amounts, regular, nothing alarming individually. Together they added up to something. He noticed that whenever he mentioned her family, her sister, her mother, Diana changed the subject with a skill that he suddenly realized had always been there. And he asked himself for the first time in 8 years, how much do I actually know about this woman? Marcus was not the kind of man who made impulsive decisions. So he didn't confront Diana, not yet, because he had learned, as an architect, that before you tear anything down, you need to understand the structure first. He hired a private detective, a quiet man named Ray, former police, discreet, good at disappearing into crowds. Marcus gave him 3 things: Diana's photo, her daily schedule, and a simple instruction: find out where she really goes. For 2 weeks, Ray followed Diana, documented everything, photographed everything. And then he called Marcus and asked to meet in person, not over the phone, in person. Marcus knew that when a detective asks to meet in person, what they have found is not simple. Ray opened the folder. Photographs, documents, a timeline. Diana had been meeting someone, a man, regularly, over several months, in a quiet neighborhood across the city. Marcus felt the familiar cold feeling of confirmation. He had suspected this. He had prepared himself for this. He was about to say something when Ray held up one hand and said, "There is more." Marcus looked down at the next photograph. It was Diana, but not going into a hotel, not sitting in a romantic restaurant. She was walking into a house, a modest, ordinary house on a quiet street, and she was carrying grocery bags. And at the door, waiting for her, was a child, a little girl, maybe 6 or 7 years old, running toward Diana with her arms open. Marcus stared at the photograph for a long time. He said, "Whose child is that?" Ray said, "That is what you need to know." Here is what Ray had uncovered. Before Marcus, before the gallery opening where they met, before everything he thought was the beginning of her story, Diana had another life. At 19 years old, she had gotten pregnant. The father had disappeared. Her family, conservative, proud, unwilling to face the shame, had given her an ultimatum: give up the child or lose everything. She had been 19 years old and completely alone, and she had made a decision that had broken her heart every single day since. She had given her daughter to a foster family, but she had never stopped being her mother. For years, secretly, carefully, Diana had maintained contact with her daughter through a social worker. The meetings Marcus's detective had photographed were not affairs. They were a mother visiting the child she had been forced to give away. The phone she guarded so carefully contained years of photographs, voice messages, drawings her daughter had made for her. The cash withdrawals paid for the child's school supplies, her clothes, small things that a mother sends when she cannot be there. Diana had not been cheating on Marcus. She had been keeping the most painful secret of her life. And she had kept it because she was terrified. Terrified that if Marcus knew, he would look at her differently, that he would not understand, that she would lose him too. She had already lost so much. Marcus drove home alone that night. He did not confront Diana. Not that night. He sat in his car outside their house for a long time, looking at the lights on inside, at the silhouette of his wife moving around the kitchen. This woman he had lived with for 8 years, who had laughed with him and traveled with him and built a home with him, who had carried something enormous and silent inside her every single day of those 8 years. He thought about the photograph of the little girl running toward her mother. He thought about what it must cost a person, every day, to love someone that much and not be able to say it out loud. He thought about Diana at 19, completely alone, facing an impossible choice with no one in her corner. And Marcus, this precise, patient man who built structures designed to last, sat in his car and felt something unexpected replace the anger he thought he would feel. He felt grief, not for himself, for her. He went inside. Diana was in the kitchen. She smiled when she heard the door, asked if he was hungry. Marcus sat down at the table, and he said, "I know about your daughter." The silence that followed was the longest of either of their lives. Diana turned around slowly. Her face had gone completely still. The smile was gone. In its place was something Marcus had never seen there before. Pure, unguarded fear. Not the fear of being caught doing something wrong, the fear of losing the person you love most. She did not deny it. She did not make excuses. She sat down across from him and she told him everything. From the beginning, at 19, the family's ultimatum, the decision she had made and unmade in her head 1,000 times since, the years of secret visits, the phone full of drawings. She talked for a long time, and when she finished, she looked at him and said, "I understand if this changes everything." Marcus was quiet for a moment, and then he said, "It does change everything." He reached across the table and took her hand. He said, "I want to meet her." It took a few weeks to arrange. There were conversations with the social worker, with the foster family, with Diana's daughter, whose name was Lily, who was 7 years old and had her mother's eyes and her mother's laugh. Marcus had designed hundreds of spaces in his career, buildings meant to hold important moments. He had never been as nervous walking into any of them as he was walking up the path to that modest house on that quiet street. Lily opened the door. She looked at Marcus with the particular directness that 7-year-olds have, no filter, no pretense, and said, "Are you my mom's husband?" Marcus crouched down to her level and said, "Yes, and I've heard a lot about you." Lily thought about this for a moment. Then she said, "Do you want to see my drawings?" And just like that, in the way that children have of cutting through everything complicated and getting straight to what matters, the door opened, literally and in every other way. Marcus and Diana had a long road ahead of them. There were honest conversations, difficult ones. Marcus had to sit with the fact that his wife had kept something enormous from him for 8 years. That took time to process. It took patience. It took choosing, deliberately, to understand rather than to blame. And Diana had to learn, for the first time in her adult life, what it felt like to not be carrying everything alone. They went to therapy. together and separately. They talked more in the following 6 months than they had in the previous 6 years. And slowly, the way real things are built, not quickly but solidly, they became something stronger than what they had been before. Because now, there were no secrets between them. Marcus began the process of helping Diana pursue legal custody of Lily. It was long, it was complicated. It required lawyers and paperwork and patience. But Marcus was an architect. He understood better than most people that the things worth having take time to build. 14 months after Marcus first walked up that path to the modest house on the quiet street, Lily came home. Not to the foster family's house. Not to secret visits and grocery bags left at the door. To Marcus and Diana's house. The house Marcus had built. Her room had been designed by an architect, which meant it was the most thoughtfully considered child's bedroom in the history of children's bedrooms. Every detail chosen with care. Bookshelves she could reach, a window seat for reading, a wall specifically designated for drawings. On the first morning, Marcus made pancakes. Lily sat at the kitchen counter and watched him with the same direct, filter-free attention she'd given him the first day. Then she said, "You make them wrong. My mom makes them with blueberries." Diana burst out laughing. Marcus stared at this 7-year-old for a moment, and then he smiled the kind of smile that means, "I think I'm going to love you very much." And he went to get the blueberries. Diana's family, the ones who had given her that impossible ultimatum all those years ago, eventually found out. Some of them came around, some of them didn't. Diana decided for the first time in her life that she was done arranging herself to fit other people's comfort. She had a daughter. She had a husband who had chosen to understand rather than to leave. She had, finally, a life with no hidden rooms. The social worker who had helped Diana maintain contact with Lily over the years attended their first family Christmas. She sat at the table Marcus had designed and ate the meal Diana had cooked and watched Lily show everyone her drawings. She told Marcus later, "In 20 years of this work, I have never seen one of these stories end like this." Marcus thought about that for a moment and said, "Most architects will tell you, the best structures are the ones that get redesigned after the first version fails." Here is what I take from Marcus and Diana's story. Secrets almost always come from fear. Not from cruelty, not from malice, from fear. Fear of being judged, fear of losing someone, fear of the moment when the person you love most sees the part of you that you are most ashamed of. Diana had carried that fear for 8 years, and it had slowly built a wall between her and the person she loved. But Marcus did something that is genuinely rare. When the wall came down, when he saw everything she had been hiding, he didn't walk away. He asked to meet her daughter. Not every story like this ends the way Marcus and Diana's did, but some do. And the ones that do tend to involve someone who chooses understanding over anger, chooses curiosity over judgment, chooses the person over the secret. If this story made you feel something, if you want more stories like this,